open the webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just give it another minute for everybody as they're coming in to our webinar. Once again, good afternoon. We're just going to give it one more minute for folks to join. We see a lot of folks are still coming into the webinar room right now. Okay, it looks like we still have a few folks joining, but let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for our Hubs and Spokes initiative. Today, we are going over the findings and next steps. My name is Connie Nakano. I'm Communications Director of the California Department of Aging. Next slide. Just a few logistics to go over at the top of our meeting. Today's meeting is, we're scheduled 1 to 3, but we're actually targeting to try to get you guys out of here within 90 minutes. So we'd like to try to end it within 90 minutes if we can, but we do have that extra time if we need to go over it. But we don't want to keep you guys here too long. But some logistics, all participants are muted during the presentations. So you may use your raise hand icon during the question and answer portion to request your line to be unmuted, or you are welcome to input your question into the Q&A box. Closed captioning is also available. You can access that by clicking the icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When you join us in the Q&A, again, share your questions and comments using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Don't put your question in the chat function. Please put it in the Q&A so that we'll see it. It does get lost in the chat function if you do put it in there. The presentation and recording will be archived, so you'll be able to visit CDA's YouTube channel, and it'll also be posted on our website. And it should be posted probably in the next 48 hours. If not sooner, we'll try to get it up. Next slide. So we got a lot to cover today. On our agenda, we're going to go through the overview and how we got here. Next, we'll go to the CSUS project scope and purpose, and also the overview of their data and findings. But then we'll go into the CDA response. We want to summarize what we heard and CDA's commitment. We'll hear from some of our partner perspectives, and then we can discuss as a group what the next steps would be. So now I'd like to turn it over to our director, Susan DeMorris.
Thank you, Connie, and good afternoon, everybody. It is great to be here to continue this conversation that first started last summer and went in well into the fall. So we are resuming the dialogue, and I see there are many familiar faces who've been contributing to this conversation for well over a year. So thank you for returning and for being with us today. And a very special thank you to Connie, who just opened us, who has been a leading this with her communications team at CDA for all of the stakeholder engagement. And we really appreciate Connie's great work. I wanted to share with you a slide that I hope is familiar to all of you by this time. And if it's not, this is really to remind all of us why we're gathered here today and talking about our Aging and Disability Network and its strengths and weaknesses, and how we are all preparing for 2030, when things will look very different than they do today. And in conversations in my first 5 months in this role as director of the Department of Aging, meeting with many of you individually and with your organizations, I can tell you this is not new information to anyone who is in direct service provision and is already seeing these numbers reach their doors, their phone lines, their websites. So this is familiar to all of us who work in the aging and disability community. And it really struck me driving home. Now we're back in the CDA office. And when you think about 1 in 4 Californians being 60 or older in 2030, what that looks like when you're sitting in traffic and you think if every 4th car has somebody who's 60 or older, and apply that to our workforce, to our service delivery network, and our communities. So that's why we're here today, to talk about how we prepare for 2030 as a state. Next slide, please. This slide also is familiar to everyone, I believe, who's joining us today. We're now at about 175 participants. We know that California's population as a whole is increasingly diverse, and the older adult and disability community is reflective of that as well. I also know that from talking to so many of you over the last few months and through all of our stakeholder work at the Department of Aging, is that our population isn't only increasingly ethnically and racially diverse, but we are seeing a more complex older and disabled population in our services, more medically complex, more mental health and behavioral health issues and challenges, certainly more housing and financial limitations with the population that we're seeing today, and that those trends will continue through 2030 as well. Next slide. We wanted to start by focusing on some of the opportunities that emerged at the start of this hubs and spokes conversation last summer, and some that are more new. Certainly the COVID-19 accelerator, we are still very much in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic for older adults, people in congregate settings, individuals with compromised immune systems, and who are medically complex. And the COVID pandemic, now in its 3rd year, has exposed a number of challenges and limitations and strengths in our network. We also are so fortunate to now be in the 2nd year of the Master Plan for Aging, and wrapping up the 2nd year of initiatives, the first 132 initiatives that grew out of the Master Plan for Aging. And I know that many of you who are joining us on the webinar have contributed significantly to the Master Plan, to the Long-Term Services and Support Subcommittee report, to the Equity Work Group, and to the stakeholder groups that continue to advance that work. We also have seen historic investments, state level investments, general fund investments, federal funding investments, the American Rescue Act, infrastructure dollars, and the HCBS, Home and Community-Based Services Spending Plan. So we are now in the 1st year of those historic investments. Many of them are time limited over the next 2 years. And finally, we are all part of the Medi-Cal transformation that is centered on CalAIM and the exciting opportunities within CalAIM for PATH funding, for community-based providers, for enhanced care management, for community-based supports, and much more. May 1st, older adults or individuals 50 and above who are undocumented will become eligible for full scope Medi-Cal, and our state's new Medicare Office of Innovation and Integration is up and running under Anastasia Dodson's leadership. And these are all areas that are happening just in Medi-Cal alone. Next slide, please. So to take our focus back to why we're here together today, we are recapping some tremendous work that happened last summer and fall, and you'll hear from our partners at Sac State, CSUS, in their presentation about how much time was spent, how much data was collected, how much information was gathered. And all of that was around a concept, an idea, or a notion called hubs and spokes. This was not a proposal, it was a conceptual framework, a foundation and framework for every local community to adopt in order to deliver person-centered, equity-focused, and data-driven services and outcomes to all Californians as we age. So today we're revisiting that topic and we're excited to be sharing with you the data and findings that were produced from about 6 months of collective work. Next slide. And how we got here. The summer and fall hubs and spokes town halls and surveys grew out of the master plan for aging. And when the master plan for aging was officially released and launched in January of 2021, there were 2 initiatives that prompted this work on the hubs and spokes plan. The first was to create a statewide no wrong door system. And the second was to revisit the structure of California's area agencies on aging. And from that grew the hubs and spokes idea and the public gatherings, town halls, and surveys that we'll be hearing more about today. Next slide. We were delighted and continue to be delighted to partner with Csus, our local university here in Sacramento, to analyze all of the feedback from the town halls and the surveys, as well as the very thoughtful letters that were submitted to us by a number of organizations. And today, the Csus team will be presenting their feedback and findings to all of us to help us move forward to the next steps in this process. Next slide, please. And before I turn it over to the star of the show, the CSUS research team, I want to thank once again all of the town hall participants who took the time last summer and fall to participate, all of our panelists and presenters, everyone who provided public comment and input at those town hall meetings. Also to the more than 500 people who took the time to respond to the surveys. And a very special thanks to the CSUS research team who has taken all of this information and data, analyzed it, and made sense of it for all of us today. So I'm now pleased to turn the program over to our partners at Sac State, Jonathan and Penelope, who've been leading this work for the last several months. And I'm now pleased to introduce them to you and turn the presentation over to them. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here today. My name is Jonathan Bell. Presenting with me is Penelope Dane. We're both from Sac State and are excited to share what we found with you all today. Next slide, please. So this slide is here to give you a sense of the materials we were analyzing. We watched and read the transcripts of all the virtual stakeholder events, about 700 minutes. We read through the letters submitted by stakeholder organizations. There were 12 letters. We read through the results of the survey, which was available on the CDA website and mentioned at all of the town halls. To give you a sense of the survey, there were 9 close-ended questions, 4 more close-ended questions that had open-ended options. There were 3 open-ended questions. And the survey was available in English and Spanish. So just quick few numbers with the results. We received 1 response in Spanish and 512 responses in English. Within those responses, we received 232 open-ended comments ranging in length from a couple words all the way to multiple paragraphs. What we can say about the people who responded: 68 of the people who responded said they were a caregiver, paid or unpaid, who provides services to support 1 or more individuals. 54 people said that they were a representative of an area agency on aging and or an aging and disability resource connection. 168 people said they were representatives of or working for a local city or county government. 71 people said that they were a service provider serving older adults and or persons with disabilities. 46 people said they were an advocate. 42 people identified as an older adult or individual with disabilities who received services that support their independence. 3 said they worked in academia, 5 in philanthropy, and 55 people identified as other. So everything we share with you today, our findings, the themes we identified, the quotes we use, and the numbers we provide, all of it comes from this collection of information.
Good afternoon, everyone. Next to me is a slide of just all of the different events so many of you participated in. I want to start with an acknowledgement that it was a real privilege for John and I to get to work on this project. Aging and disability touch all of our families. Seeing the people who cared for us receive the care they need and deserve is something personal for us all. As we watched through webinars, town halls, read through survey responses, we were struck by both the stunning commitment to providing care and the staggering need for care for the aging and disabled in California. Let me be clear, the need for care is a global and national issue of the utmost importance. And seeing this close up from the view of California's diverse viewpoints, experiences, and ingenuity was really something. So here's some information about the respondents and participants whose feedback we examined. In the case of stakeholder events, we were limited by not knowing much about the attendees. We do not know whose voices are missing from this report. As researchers without demographics, we cannot speak to whether or not these voices represent California or whether or not the viewpoints we heard can generalize to all of California. What we do know is that we heard some very consistent themes in the data. And as researchers, we know that these types of strong themes often reemerge later in larger representative studies. A note about the fine print on this slide. Frequencies represent how many times a theme appeared in the data, not how many people mentioned a theme. This is important. As we present how often we heard various themes, remember that represents how many times something was mentioned, but it does not mean a different person said it. As many folks attended multiple stakeholder events, the same person might have brought up the same issue at multiple events.
Okay, in this next section, we're going to share some of the patterns we found while exploring all this information. But before that, I want to say something about the importance of direct quotations. What we're going to do throughout our presentation is share with you all some general findings within each theme. After we do that, we will provide a few direct quotations from participants. They could be from the town halls, the open-ended surveys, or the organizational letters. Paraphrasing, summarizing, and grouping into themes are invaluable techniques. They give us a sense of trends and help us better understand how groups of people feel. But this necessitates a kind of editing, of revising someone's words. We believe that centering the voices of all stakeholders in this project, those whose lives will be impacted by this endeavor, is essential to the success of this project. Because of this, we're providing a mixture of summarized findings and direct quotes. Next slide, please. So in this section, we're going to go through the patterns we found. So as Penelope and I read through all of the information, we independently labeled and grouped quotes. After doing this, we sat down and examined each other's results. It was evident that much of what we found could be grouped into 6 different broad categories. Those are the ones on the graph here. So the first category, oversight and accountability, had 212 different quotes that we identified within that theme. Equity considerations in shaping hubs and spokes is the next theme and was coded for 198 times. Funding is the third and was coded for 172 times. CDA needs to better understand stakeholder experience is the fourth theme with 118 distinct quotes. Stakeholders and customers need more information to participate, had 90, and the labor crisis, the final one, the workforce crisis, had 39 distinct quotes. Just a quick note about those numbers. Penelope said this before too, and I'll say again, just while they are valuable in pointing us towards the priorities and concerns voiced, the data collection procedures did not allow us to determine how many unique individuals made comments grouped into a particular theme.
So oversight and accountability was the most frequent theme, as John mentioned. While the leadership and aging webinar on success outcomes really made clear how resourceful all AAAs already are in making up for underfunding, rural areas spoke up about how hard they've worked to combine resources, build relationships, and build volunteer pools. They were very concerned that what is effective in larger population areas, such as county oversight, would not be effective for them. Maintaining flexibility was important to many commenters, and there is concern that county oversight could lead to poor care outcomes. What is going to happen to the existing structure maps and who is going to make those decisions was a key theme in this section. Multiple stakeholders recommended in their letters that CDA not engage in any oversight regarding potentially restructuring. Other stakeholders wanted to ensure that CDA stays accountable to care recipient needs. This theme related to the second most frequent one we heard, equity and inclusion. As part of equity and inclusion is how stakeholders are included in decision-making that includes them. Equity is used to mean different things at different times. For the purposes of this report, equity is defined as focusing on achieving equitable outcomes rather than the equal distribution of resources. The data overwhelmingly focused on equitable outcomes, and at times, stakeholders pointed to equal resource distribution as generating inequity in service delivery. Equity is often used to mean racial equity as stakeholders and care recipients discuss equity as it relates to race, disability, income, housing status, sexual orientation, and region. When we, the Sacramento State researchers, talk about equity in relationship to these events, we are talking about equitable outcomes for all these groups. One way to think about the difference between equal resource distribution and equitable outcomes is with a dinner table metaphor. So you'll see that in the slide that I have up right now. So if a group of people with different nutritional needs and nutritional histories sat down to dinner, an equal amount of food on each plate would not result in equitable nourishment outcomes. So that's the image on the left. You might have to look a little bit closely, but you can see that the food on everyone's plate is the same. A person who's suffering from long-term malnutrition may struggle to absorb calories. A pregnant person will have different caloric and nutritional needs than a not pregnant adult. One diner's severe food allergy could be deadly. One person may need assistance to consume what is on their plate. To ensure the equitable outcome of meeting each diner's nutritional needs, the resources invested into each plate of food must differ based on the needs of who is eating. If you look at the image on the right, you see a representation of equitable outcomes. Everyone is eating dinner, but what is on their plate is different. Continuing with this metaphor, there's a difference between inviting different voices to the table and equity and representation. If the menu planners carefully consider the needs of different groups, plan a menu, then give everyone options to choose from, equity and representation has not been achieved. Regardless of the research and good intent of the meal planners, predetermined choices may or may not meet the diner's nutritional needs. By the time the menu choices have been sent out, it is too late for those with lived experience, those who need the meal to survive, to shape what the meal will look like. Without equity and representation in planning the meal, it would be difficult to gather the information necessary to ensure an equitable outcome. As one of the presenters at the town hall last summer said, the system users must be part of the design. Calls for CDA to engage in equity and representation came through in many stakeholder forums. Most town halls mentioned the problem of the digital divide and recipients accessing services, and commenters on the survey suggested CDA seek venues other than the internet to reach the aging community, such as television. The digital divide is also a barrier to equitable planning for hubs and spokes. All the events took place online, which was absolutely necessary due to the pandemic. And it means that those without digital resources have so far often been excluded from participating in the planning phase of the Master Plan on Aging. There are many different groups in California needing aging and disabled care. We suggest CDA invest in determining specifically which populations are being missed. The need for two groups to take part in planning really stands out: care recipients and frontline workers. How CDA conceptualizes groups needing care will have an impact on the material realities of those receiving the care. This is a direct quote from a town call. I'm a Laotian senior. My family has 5 seniors. I, myself, am a senior, 65. My mom is 84. We're an invisible community. We came here as refugees from Southeast Asia many years ago. Most of our first generation seniors need lots of help. We don't really have assistance as we are supposed to. I just want to take the opportunity to tell the policymaker people that tried to develop the program to meet the need of our diversity. In the Asian community, there's many, many different Asian people from different regions of the Asian continent. So not one group, not one Asian group can represent all people. National data supported this comment. The average poverty rate among all Asians in the US is 10%. The 2019 data from the Pew Research Center shows that poverty rates vary greatly among Asian origin groups in the United States, with Hmong Burmese experiencing a poverty rate of 25%, Indians a poverty rate of 6%. Achieving equitable outcomes around aging and disabled care will mean taking deep dives into differences both between and within groups often read as homogeneous, such as the speaker mentioned. Following this example, using the 10% poverty rate as a baseline in calculating need for Asian communities in California would not provide enough resources in areas with primarily Hmong Burmese care recipients or the other groups listed on this slide. The data supporting this speaker's comment allude to the importance of using data in a way that will drive equitable outcomes. Basing funding allocation decisions on data groups that are too broad, such as all Asian communities, all Latinx, all Black, all urban or all rural communities, or all disabled communities, or all unhoused communities, will likely mean that inequitable outcomes will continue. It'll be important for CDA to carefully and thoroughly assess need, as this example demonstrates that treating diverse categories, such as Asian, as homogeneous from a policy perspective can have devastating results for people needing care. People within the groups mentioned have varying needs. More research is needed to determine what resources it'll take to move towards equitable outcomes. Place and geography was a factor of equity for California that emerged in this data, as some speakers from rural areas noted they find the older American Acts funding formulas based on population are not serving their needs or taking into account the added cost of disaster response, fuel and meal delivery, and cost of living. Other commenters noted the cost of living and services is not accounted for in the older American Acts in urban areas. The organizational leadership of the hub must include disabled individuals with lived experience, as well as older adults and service providers with relevant expertise. As I mentioned with the dinner table slide, equity in this data was about outcomes and design. Many respondents spoke to the importance of centering lived experience to ensure equitable outcomes. Some additional equity considerations that emerged were things leading to unequal outcomes and receiving and delivering care are listed here: race, ethnicity, the digital divide, eligibility criteria for receiving services, a lack of provider support, inaccessibility, being unhoused. As John will cover next in the funding theme, California's role in making recommendations on the national stage is an immense opportunity to lead the nation in orienting resources towards equitable outcomes for aging and disabled care.
The next theme we identified in the data is about funding-related concerns. We decided to start with this quote because it captures both the challenges and the opportunities associated with funding. Quote, "The emergency relief funding that has come through in response to the pandemic has been a true blessing. We have proven to ourselves and others that given sufficient funding, we can and do accomplish incredible things." End quote. Next slide, please. While it may not be surprising that funding was a major concern, here are some of the different types of concerns that emerged within this theme. We found concerns about the ongoing lack of federal funding to support programs for older adults. We found questions and frustration around funding formulas that some believe are too reliant on population density. We heard providers as they spoke about the conflict between administrative costs and service delivery they often experience. And lastly, we found much concern that under-resourced AAAs and ADRCs will incur the increased administrative costs of restructuring without receiving any additional funding or other support. Next slide, please. So this is the graph on this slide is showing how national funding for older adults has not kept pace with the growth in the population of people over the age of 60. Next slide, please. This is just a bit more about the dwindling national funding. As we saw in the graph, this funding is not keeping pace with the growth in the number of adults over the age of 60. And when you take inflation into account, funding in 2019 decreased by 16% since 2001, while the population of older adults has increased by 63% in that same period of time. A few caveats. First, this data does not account for COVID-19 funding increases or any other post-COVID changes. And secondly, the funding formulas for disability services were unclear from this report.
Right, our fourth theme was CDA needs to better understand stakeholder experience. As the quote from a town hall says, the system users need to be part of the design. The survey CDA administered that John mentioned earlier provided a lot of insight into barriers to care. These slides are here for folks to look at when this is posted to the website, or we are happy to review them in the Q&A if people want to discuss today. These are two slides from the survey. But looking at the term barriers to care, not receiving information from a single source is one clear barrier to care. There are additional challenges that stakeholders mention that can prevent people from accessing services. Overall, for this theme, the data pointed to CDA needing more information to adequately address the multiple barriers to care.
Okay, the next theme we identified is stakeholders need more information to provide meaningful feedback and recommendations. On this slide, we have the results of a poll that was taken during one of the town hall events. Participants were asked, do you feel like you have enough of an understanding of hubs and spokes after today's town hall to give meaningful feedback and recommendations? You can see the percentages for each response here. Next slide, please. But what we found really significant here is that only 28% of the respondents felt that they had absolutely enough information to provide feedback and ideas. Next slide, please. In general, we found that people really want to participate in this process. They are interested, excited, and ready to share ideas. But that said, they're confused about the metaphor and the general direction of the project. And in the midst of this confusion, we found many concerns voiced about things like changes in structure, loss of funding, and increased workloads. Next slide, please. We have a couple of quotes that reflect this desire for more information and greater clarity. First one here is, quote, if there is an ADRC in place and a AAA in place, where does the client go first? It seems a bit duplicative. Which one is the hub? Which one is the spoke? It seems confusing despite the overview. Next slide. The second one we have is, quote, you spoke in metaphors regarding the idea of what the future is in serving older adults in California. One door, a house with many rooms. Can there be more definition as to what this vision is? Will it be an actual location where the public can go to in person, and there will be representatives from the various service organizations? Will this be virtual? Will it be over the phone? Will there be pilot programs? Next slide. This is a challenge. People want to participate, but they need more clarity to alleviate unnecessary concern. Next slide. So this is a list of key questions that emerged as we analyzed the data. While these questions are important, this is not an exhaustive list. People are wondering, what is the plan? Which decisions have already been made? How will future decisions be made, and by whom? How and when will stakeholders be involved? How will funding be assessed? How will this be paid for? What are hubs and where will they be located? How are hubs different from ADRCs? Will the new model be independent control or county-based? So two main things to take away from this theme is, first, that much of the feedback that was given appeared to be shaped by worry and confusion. And second, that transparency around the decision-making process that CDA utilizes with regards to this project is essential to engage and collaborate with stakeholders as this project moves forward. Our last theme is called the workforce crisis. One aspect of this is captured in this map. The areas of the map that are darker blue are projected to have a significant unmet need for home health aides, part of a growing trend in the US. This is part of a larger research study that found that across the country, demand for healthcare workers will outpace supply by 2025. Next slide, please. Part of this theme, of course, is the need for more workers. In addition, though, we found a few other important things. Adequate training is also essential. The retention of the current workforce is already a challenge, one that is only magnified, I suspect, in our current context. And finally, we heard over and over again that more administrative work is only going to magnify the already pressing demand for more workers. Next slide, please. In these next two slides, we have a couple of quotes in which concerns about retention are raised. This first person noted, quote, "Having a stable home care worker workforce, private or public, is essential to helping people stay safe in their home," end quote. This person had similar concerns. They said, quote, "Will CDA use its power to ensure the local AAAs use the additional funds to raise the wages of the service providers? If the goal is to improve and enhance the consumer's experience, it is paramount that we reduce the high turnover of program managers and key staff." Next slide, please. And finally, there's this quote that speaks to training concerns. Quote, "I want to speak to the tremendous labor force challenges that California has in order to ensure that we have adequate care for the older adults that we're serving. Most of the people that work with older adults are woefully untrained to do the work that they're doing. They're woefully untrained to work with persons with disabilities. And we need to start paying attention to the investment that we have to make in our human resources to be able to make sure that they are able to provide the services that our clients need." Lastly, we just want to take a moment to highlight an example of the types of exciting ideas that can emerge when you put committed stakeholders together in a space and give them the chance to converse, learn, and collaborate. This idea, one of many, emerged during a discussion around workforce concerns. This person said, quote, "So my thought is developing the workforce within the community itself to care for and provide assistance to the community." Does that make sense? Providing state funding, federal funding to develop a direct care, direct service workforce in the community to care for their own. Rural communities typically are very, very proud of their strengths and how they come together. To be able to use dollars to help its own workforce to support its own community, I think would be phenomenal. Next slide, please. So as we begin to conclude our presentation, I want to spend a minute wondering about what we think is missing. Next slide. And to do this, I'm going to use another metaphor. We're taking this approach because metaphors are useful. They help us understand something in terms that are familiar. As we tried to wrap our heads around this project, we found this comparison useful. We imagine this project is like a business owner coming into a community and building a supermarket. In this community, let's imagine that people must drive elsewhere to get what they need. Town X is only 10 miles away and has a small grocery store, but residents have to go even further to City Z to get all the supplies they need. This community would benefit much if there was a place everyone could go to get the various items they need. To prepare for this new market, there is much the business owner must do. To begin the planning process, various food providers are consulted to better understand what they have to offer and which products they can stock regularly. Similarly, grocery store operators in other small towns are contacted to gain insight into their best practices and the challenges they face. The business owner is tempted to open the supermarket at this point. The business owner knows what is available and has an idea how supermarkets are run, but the business owner is then surprised to meet resistance from the town folk, even though it seems obvious they need this store. People worry about disruptions to their routine and have established patterns in their lives that are consistent, predictable, and known. They aren't convinced they need something new imposed on their lives. The business owner, flabbergasted, attempts to reach out to members of this community and ask them what they need. The people from the town are filled with ideas. While some are unrealistic, for example, stocking high-end caviar from the Caspian Sea, And some comments still reflect anger at the unknown. What the business owner discovers is that through conversation with future customers, a better understanding of their needs and wants begins to form. It is in the synthesis of this knowledge, in combining what the community needs and wants with what is available and possible, that the business owner is able to open a store that not only serves the town people, but is welcomed, valued, and integrated into the community.
So this last slide is the core solutions that we saw emerge from all of the data and stakeholder suggestions. People wanted more involvement from and collaboration with older adults, people with disabilities, family caregivers, and frontline workers. They urged CDA to continue to work with agency providers and pointed that strong stakeholder engagement overlaps with equity. It was a real privilege for John and me to get to dive into all this information and work with CDA to see what stakeholders said about the master plan on aging. We applaud CDA for their bravery of inviting researchers in and letting us present our findings. And we look forward to following CDA's progress with the master plan on aging going forward.
Thank you very much, Penelope and Jonathan. Thank you for sharing the data that was produced by our Aging and Disability Network up and down the state, many who are on this call. And thank you for the suggestions and solutions and shortcomings that you illuminated through your report. We very much appreciate it. So where we are now, after focusing on the outreach and engagement last summer and fall and giving CSUS the time to process and analyze the data, we find ourselves, all of us, at a new launching point, at our next launching point. And what we'll be focusing on, drawing on the data, the solutions and suggestions that were provided for us, to resume the conversation and to continue the dialogue and engagement. What can we be doing now in 2022 to structure our system for 2030? So the work that started in 2021 continues this year and next as we're building out that system that is stronger and can reach more people with more complex needs, with a focus on equity and inclusion. And what we heard strongly, and I have the rare privilege of, while the Hubs and Spokes outreach was happening, I was a stakeholder representing individuals and families with the Alzheimer's Association. So what I heard loud and clear and am personally committed to is to deepening our engagement with older adults, people with disabilities, and family caregivers for this next phase that we're embarking on. Next slide, please. So what we heard what you just heard in the slides. First and foremost, confusion about what is the plan, where is CDA headed, is there more to this than meets the eye, and confusion about terminology, language, and the metaphor that was used for Hubs and Spokes. So we heard that loud and clear. We understand the confusion. We experience it ourselves, and it's confusing to us as well. And we know that we're part of, we contribute to that confusion. So that message was delivered loud and clear. We heard absolutely strong public need and demand. And Penelope, thank you for saying it was a privilege to work on this project. That came through very strong, that a very important reminder about if there are changes, any changes would be to benefit the public, to better meet people's needs and to meet demand for more services. We heard about system challenges. Absolutely. There are many of them. And also we heard about system strengths, the strength of our network, the strength of our personnel, the deep commitment by individuals who are working in the Aging and Disability Network, whether they're working at a AAA, an independent living center, a county, a JPA, or a CBO that's network that is part of the network. Absolutely, the deep commitment and expertise in our network. We heard opportunities for reform that go well beyond what has happened. You know, opportunities for additional reform, leaning into the Medi-Cal transformation, leading into the master plan for aging, leaning into other initiatives that are happening locally, regionally, statewide, and at the federal level. And finally, the adage, nothing about us without us, was mentioned several times, and that's something that I hold dear, and our team at CDA holds very close to our work. And so we heard that too, that this is absolutely something that we will be doing shoulder to shoulder going forward, and something that we did do, that the town hall meetings and the survey were really intended to not proceed without anyone. And if we miss the mark on that, we will do better going forward. Next slide, please. So what we're committed to for the next phase of this work is to be person-centered. Really, as CDA takes stock of this data, looks at our work plans and timelines, our resources, and our role in the Cal HHS agency, first and foremost is that we will be person-centered. Everything that we do will lead with who is the beneficiary of this work: the older adult, the person with disability, the family caregiver, and we will build out from there. We renew our commitment to engagement, formal and informal engagement. We will make this a part of our stakeholder engagement committees, of which there are 7. We will expand the reach to others that are operating by other agencies and throughout the Cal HHS agency. So we will try to populate other work with this, and we will be joining groups and organizations for their meetings to engage directly. And then we will also have a series of informal meetings and communications that many of you will be part of. And we welcome any invitations to join you, communicate, to have meetings. So you'll be seeing more about our engagement strategy in the next 6 weeks or so. Partnership, we, as you heard in the presentation, that there's a lot of excitement, enthusiasm, innovation, ideas, and solutions in our network. We are absolutely committed to partnership with our vast aging and disability network in all parts of our state. And finally, but not finally, our commitment to equity is as strong as ever, to ensure that when we are person-centered, that we are looking at all Californians in how we structure, build, and design a system for the future. On this slide, you see a link to the California Health and Human Services Agency guiding principles, and these guide all of our work. So whether it's on this topic or any other topic, that influences our thinking to be person-centered, equity-focused, and data-driven. Next slide, please. And the subtext to many of the comments, and you heard it stated, there are 3 areas where there was not only confusion, but as you heard Penelope and Jonathan say, concern. And we've grouped these into the following categories: governance structure, which is how things are administered at the local level; geographic distribution and boundaries. So these were the comments related to maps and the PSA borders. We heard that. And then, of course, funding formulas and administrative costs and administrative burden. So these are areas that we will be tackling with you together. And you'll be hearing more about that too. And we will be soliciting your input on how best to do that, whether we do it topically, whether we group these, whether we meet with cohort groups, and there will be a poll starting to ask for feedback from this group before we wrap today. And next slide. And in addition to this, we just wanted to share, we're very proud at the Department of Aging, in collaboration with our sister departments in the California Health and Human Services Agency, with support from the legislature and the governor's office, that we have not been waiting for this report to do the good work that's needed in our state, and that we are very actively right now building a statewide no wrong door system that is backed by a consumer-facing navigation system that includes a web portal, live telephone support, and data connectivity. That we are actively planning for future infrastructure needs with our partners at the Department of Healthcare Services to do identify gaps in the LTSS, which is Long-Term Services and Supports Delivery System, and to build a roadmap for our state to see where we have services and supports, where we don't, where they're inadequate, where there's greater need. So that's in progress now. We are one of the lead departments addressing the workforce crisis. We are responsible at CDA for the non-in-home supportive services, home and community-based services workforce. So this would be individuals who work in adult day healthcare, PACE, the program for all-inclusive care for the elderly, the MSSP program, and some of the Medi-Cal assisted, some of the Medicaid waiver programs like the assisted living waiver. And we join others who are working on specific job types, such as certified nurse assistants who work in nursing homes, Department of Social Services that is doing fantastic work for our in-home supportive services. And it's a collective effort that's happening across the Health and Human Services Agency. And then finally, we remain committed to helping all of our partners explore opportunities for deepening their relationships with health plans at the local level so that they can be active participants in CalAIM with respect to community supports, enhanced care management, and the PATH funding that will be announced later in a few months' time. And next slide. So our commitment to partnership and engagement starts with some of the key partners who have been with us on this concept, this idea since last summer. So before we close today, we wanted to invite the perspectives of some of the key partners in this work: the California Commission on Aging, the California Association of Area Agencies on Aging, the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, and the California State Association of Counties. So I'm going to invite the chair of the California Commission on Aging, Ellen Schmeeding, to kick us off, and she'll be followed by Michael Costa, Christina Mills, and Justin Garrett. So Ellen, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Susan.
Welcome.
It's great to be invited. I'm Ellen Schmeeding, the chair of the California Commission on Aging, the principal advocacy group for older adults in California. And we were also invited to participate with the hubs and spokes town halls that occurred over the past year, and felt very honored to be present. I had the opportunity to serve on the Long-Term Care Services and Support Subcommittee for the Master Plan, representing our commission. That group and the master plan both forwarded the recommendation for a no wrong door system building on aging and disability resource connections. And that issue has been strongly supported by our commission as well. We also feel it's very important to look at how our area agencies on aging can meet the needs of the local citizens in their own communities and what resources they'll need to do so. I found that the information presented today by Cal State Sacramento was extremely helpful and detailed in understanding the perspectives of all those 500 people that came together and took their time to give input. Particularly, I was interested in slide 31 that talked about how important it is to get information from a trusted single source. 92% noted the importance. And working in San Diego at the AAA for many years, we learned that. We learned how important it was to have information and assistance readily and clearly available, and that people knew they could trust us to provide the needed information and they knew how to do it. We also spent heavily on advertising so individuals would know where to turn and how to access. One thing I can say is the workforce. I was surprised to see it's not till 2025 when when there's no longer an adequate supply of care providers. We feel that every day in San Diego. I work at St. Paul Senior Services, and the issue of workforce is so relevant. We've got to have the vibrant and committed workforce earning a livable wage to provide the care we need to move into the future. And this is also a commission priority. This year, we have a forum planned on workforce in May at the C4A conference. So I just want to close by saying, I think we're at an extremely important point in California. We're working together to enhance and improve our supports for older adults and persons with disabilities. And we have some key areas in our favor. A, attention on the most important issues. B, actual resources in the form of funding and support from state and national sources. And then finally, our joint commitment to move forward together. We want to hear from consumers and providers. We want all voices heard. And we want to work together to create that excellent service system that our constituents deserve. So the Commission looks forward in continuing with this effort. And we're very, very pleased to be invited. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. We appreciate your continued support and leadership. And we'll now next hear from Michael Costa with C4A. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And Ellen, you're a difficult act to follow, I have to say. Your comments are pretty comprehensive and welcome. And so just a little bit about C4A. We're the association that represents the 33 area agencies on aging across California. We are part of really the backbone of senior service provision in California. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with the department and other stakeholders to really move beyond the initial research phase and really begin to address how we're going to address some of the themes that have been brought up by that research. And particularly 4 themes come to mind. First is the theme of local context and how important that is. We know that the demographics vary by context. The needs of the folks in the area vary, and the capacity of the service system to actually address needs vary. And I think goals of all AAAs is to begin to really be sensitive and address the needs locally in the service areas they represent. So we look forward to continuing to look for solutions and methods of addressing that local context. Also, a theme was payment and funding to cover cost, for example. Certainly the cost of running a meal across San Francisco versus running it up to the Grapevine from Santa Clarita is different, and payment and reimbursement for services need to take account of that. And so we will be fighting for that. And I think we all also kind of understand that there are administrative costs associated with that accrue not only to the AAAs, but also to meal providers. And so one of our goals is to really help foster a fair and equitable reimbursement system. Also, one of the core themes that was mentioned over and over again is the need for information and referral guidance. It's a core services that AAAs have been providing for decades, and ADRCs provide now as well. And we really need to work and develop an information and referral system that is adequate for the need. And I would say the AAAs are really welcome the opportunity to participate in the development of that. And the other theme was home care and caregiver workforce issues, making sure that the workforce is adequate going forward. AAAs now provide a range of caregiver-related services. We're looking to expand that going forward, and we're looking to work with the state to help that occur. So the overall, I think, point I'd like to make is that the AAAs in California are embedded in the delivery system. We're very much part and parcel. We're committed to that. And that extends into looking at the opportunities for us to participate in CalAIM and managed care and healthcare in general. So we are committed to moving forward in that direction as well. So, I'm not sure what the next steps are, Susan, but if it involves a planning committee, steering committee, we as AAAs are committed to participating in that effort very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We accept your offer, and you will be. We'll be plotting that with you. And we also do very much look forward to participating in your annual meeting in person in May, where many of these themes and topics will be discussed. Now, I am happy to introduce Christina Mills from the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Christina Mills, Executive Director of the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. And for those of you who have never met me in person, I'm a wheelchair user woman, middle-aged with shoulder-length hair with lots of gray in it. It's been an absolute pleasure to be a part of this coming together and process over the last few years. And I feel like I continuously say that we're just at the beginning, because we truly are. And I want to first acknowledge the fact that Susan DeMorris came in to CDA during the time of the research projects being conducted at CSUS at Cal State Sacramento, and really appreciate the researchers for doing the work that they've done and showing us the results of it. But Susan coming in and being able to lead this process and really admit that there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of need for us to continue to work together. And my organization, which is the State Association of Independent Living Centers across California, is committed to really making that happen and working with CDA and all of our state partners and our aging partners locally to ensure that we're bringing equity and inclusion to the table, that we're talking about disability issues, we're talking about aging issues, what I like to call lifespan diversity issues. And I cannot say enough about the work that we've done in California to really bring the aging and disability communities together is really a model for the rest of the country. And so many times over the last year and a half or two, folks have called from other states and said, how in the world did you get disability and aging to come together in your state? And really, it takes a village. So we really look forward to continuing that conversation. As you've heard today, there's a lot to be worked on, but relationship building, in my opinion, is where it starts, and that's both locally, statewide, as well as nationally when that happens. Bringing people with lived experience to the table, which is what independent living centers do best. We are run by and for disabled people, and we must have at least 51% of our board and staff member represent disability across the spectrum. And I just really want to say thank you to the Cal State folks that also did a great picture of what the difference is between inclusion and equity. That was amazing. And a lot of people have a hard time understanding what that truly means. And you did a terrific job. We are looking forward to continuing this conversation. And I feel like a broken record. We are still near the beginning, but we will get there. And it is because of our stepping stones and where we've come and where we're going is why we continue to do great work together. And maybe eventually it'll bring us to also having an administration on community living and really looking at what does that spectrum of services and programs look like from birth to death in the state of California when people are in need of services. Thank you so much.
Christina, thank you for joining us and your comments very much appreciated. And now we're going to wrap up the partner perspectives, but these are not the only perspectives. These are representative, but we want to hear from others in the time that remains. So now I'd like to introduce all of you to Justin Garrett from CSAC.
Great. Thank you, Director DeMorris. Hi, everyone. Justin Garrett. I'm a senior legislative representative with the California State Association of Counties. I work on the Human Services Policy area. CSAC represents all 58 counties in California. County supervisors are our members, and they are deeply invested in ensuring that the needs of the aging and disabled community in their communities are met and cared for. And so really excited to be a part of this process, and really the master plan overall. It has definitely helped to accelerate interest and action in caring for the needs of these communities. And so we're appreciative of this process. And thank you for letting me provide a few brief comments today. Counties have a number of roles, from direct provision of aging services through adult services and AAAs to really a key role in other aspects of the community that are important, whether it's transportation or housing, disaster response, healthcare. And so there's a lot we can do. And as we look towards the Hubs and Spokes initiative, we really appreciate the open and collaborative approach that's been used throughout this process in gathering feedback by the Department of Aging. Counties had some strong feelings about this, and we really appreciate that our voices have been heard, as well as that of everyone else. As our aging population continues to grow, the state, counties, AAAs, nonprofit, and community-based organizations, we must continue to work together as we are to best meet the needs of this diverse population. And so we really appreciate from today's briefing that the next steps outline a commitment to continue to work together, particularly as it relates to the governance structure, geographic distribution, and funding. It's critical for counties. Every county is unique with different circumstances, resources availability, and geographic challenges in terms of providing services to individuals and families. And so as this initiative continues to move forward, counties remain committed to partnering in order to meet the growing demand for services, achieve equity, retain local flexibility, and increase funding for aging services. And so thank you again for this opportunity today.
I appreciate you joining us, Justin, and to Ellen, Michael, Christina, and Justin, thank you for not just your role, but I know that your members of your organizations have been very involved and active and major contributors. So please extend our thanks to your membership as well. At this point, we'll move ahead to the next slide. And we do have 2 polls that we will take live, and we really want to, this is the beginning of our next roundup of soliciting your feedback and input. So we're going to share 2 polls now.
Thanks, Susan. So the first poll you should see up on your screen, based on, the great information that Sac State had, what 2 themes do you find is most important to you? So we've got, the first theme of more outreach needed. Second, CDA needs more information. There was a funding theme, labor crisis, equity, and also oversight and accountability. And if you want to just take a quick minute and just vote on your poll and your answer, so we can kind of see which 2 themes are emerging that everybody on the call selects as important. And while we do the poll, we're going to get ready for our Q&A discussion for comments and any questions about any of the research presented or any of the information that we've presented today. So let's see. Looks like we've got most of the answers for the poll, and it looks like the 2 themes that are really coming out is more outreach is needed, along with funding as well. So thank you everyone for answering this question on the poll. We have one more poll question. Can we go to poll question number 2? So what would you prefer work groups to be organized by region, which is like location, by service category, or your theme? So region will be the geography of a state. Service category is like the county, JPA, CFLC, AAA, or the theme, the themes that we just went over. You want your preference of how you'd like the work groups organized. So we'd like your feedback on that as well. So we'll give this about another minute for folks to kind of put in their answers as we prepare for our Q&A session. Again, the Q&A, if you'd like to put your question in the chat, you can type your question or comment in the chat, and we'll go through those. You can also hit the raise your hand icon if you'd like to ask your question live, and we'll unmute your microphone so that you'll be able to ask it live as well. And it looks like we've got most of the answers in for poll number 2. It looks like a little bit of a tie, but it looks like by geography is one of the front runners, and also by theme. So we'll take a look at that. Maybe we do it by geography by theme. But we'll thank you guys for answering that, for your feedback. So now let's go into the Q&A portion. So first question we have in the Q&A. Can someone talk to the 2030 date that was given? That's 8 years away, and why not now? Susan, you want to elaborate a little bit on that data slide that we presented in the beginning?
Sure. So that slide shows where our state is headed, and it's not just our state, it's our nation. And we are actively working today towards that date. The first step in moving our state towards 2030 was the governor's executive order that established the master plan for aging and the stakeholder process that was put in place to create California's first master plan for aging. That was released in January of 2021. So that was a critical first step. The conversations that we had last summer and fall that led to today's webinar were part of our preparation for 2030. And most definitely the investments by the legislature and the governor in our Aging and Disability Network, the historic investments that have been made, are moving us towards 2030. So the intent is absolutely not to wait until 2030 to confront these demographic challenges, but to be prepared for them and to plan accordingly. And that's part of what today's conversation is about, and what our continued engagement will include is how can we be looking ahead, looking forward, and innovating and modernizing our Aging and Disability Network so that we are in fact ready in 2030.
Thank you, Susan. So just as a reminder again, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to type your question in the Q&A box. If you have any questions pertaining to any of the information presented today by CDA or by Sac State, we'd be happy to answer those. There have been questions that have come through the Q&A box already, and it looks like we've got some answers already posted. So if you also want to take a look at that, if you would like to ask your question live, feel free to hit your raise your hand icon and we'll unmute your microphone. Or if you actually called in today, you can actually press *9 as well to raise your hand, and we'll see that. We'll be able to unmute your line as well. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes to see if we have any questions coming in. Looks like there is a hand raised. Who's got their hands? A couple hands. Let's go to Debbie Toth first.
Hi there. I was unmuting myself. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for bringing this to us. I think a common confusion, and I think that it was actually in the invitation that was really great, that just was like, this is a single point of entry for aging and disability services, like a really simple way to define it. But I think people think this is part of the master plan. When they talk to me, addressing me around the master plan, this hub and spokes thing from the master plan, I think there's confusion, and I heard that in the presentation today. And I think being able to describe that the master plan supports this kind of effort, but that this is a separate sort of thing that's been happening and been building, and it's been happening all over the United States, right? And we are trying to get it right in California by asking people what the best way is to do it, right? So I think I just wanted to sort of highlight that we have to have a really simple way to describe it, just like we've had to figure out in adult day healthcare, what a complex thing to try and discuss, or MSSP or any of the other acronyms, right? So I think it's important that we figure out that simple way to present it. And I also just want to really elevate Brenda's point in the chat that she mentioned. We have a lot of work that's been done where we've studied the heck out of stuff or implemented things and studied it and wrote reports, and they sit on shelves and collect dust. So rather than calling it the literature review portion of the hubs and spokes development, maybe we can call it the bookshelf dusting review or something along those lines. But I think it's really well taken. So I just wanted to elevate that, and thank you for continuing this work.
Debbie, thank you. That did not sound like a question. That sounded like a comment, and we appreciate your comments always. And I'll just share with the group that Debbie did host an ethnic media briefing last week at Choice and Aging in Pleasant Hill, her adult day health center. And one of the reporters asked at the end, she said that after caring for her mom for 15 years as a family caregiver, that she was learning for the very first time that day. She's a journalist and a reporter about many of the services that are provided in our network. And that was a real alarm bell for me. So that is the essence of what we're talking about here today. So the things, funding, governance, maps, and so forth are all how it's delivered, but that's absolutely the focus. And I hear you that simplifying the message and what our ultimate aim is coming off the master plan was really, and the governor's Alzheimer's task force were really focused on navigation and how people can find information and assistance when they need it, where they need it. And that's the starting point. So subsequent engagements, we'll talk about sort of the map of how that all comes together. And we're eager to have those conversations with all of you too. And by map, I mean the map of how somebody moves through the system, not a geographic map.
Thank you, Susan. We have a couple other hands raised. Let's go to Carmen Brammer.
Hi, thanks so much. This is great. Hi, Susan. Good to see you again this week. I think the second time I'm seeing you. So I do want to thank you guys for this. This was incredible, actually. I wasn't even aware that this was the kind of information we were going to get. Two questions I have is, I know in addition to California, other states across the country are looking at this as an issue too. I know New York is doing a lot of work around this. So are you also engaging with counterparts in other areas to see what their best practices are, what things they're learning, and to see if we can all just leverage the knowledge? Because I, like others, Brenda in the chat, and also what Debbie just said, I get concerned that we're going to get this information, and it just sits around and nobody does anything, and we'll be back here in 2030 having the same conversation. So how do we make sure we don't do that? And then the other thing is, how, I know outreach is one of the big things that's coming up. How do we get that? I'm African ancestry background. Our community is not hearing about this stuff. So we've really got to figure out how we deepen that relationship to get information into our community about this, because as you know, we're very leery of government agencies just because they've not been always good to us. So want to figure out how we get more deeply engaged in this work that you guys are doing and get that information spread across our community.
Thank you so much for that comment, Carmen, and thank you for your continued advocacy and dedication. It's so appreciated. With Connie here on the screen, we recently did a media interview with Univision, and it was intended to reach a Spanish audience in a broad media market, which media markets don't always lay neatly over our maps. And it was that very, we're really looking closely at how can we simplify messaging and for purposes of outreach so that people get the information that they need to get started in the system. So I hear you. I hear what you just said about how do we reach more people, and what is the information that we take. And it's a complicated system to explain. And so we really are working, that is the next step for the Department of Aging, is we're working on some focus groups up and down the state where we'll be talking to older adults, people with disabilities, and family caregivers about what it is they're looking for, the words that they look for, the type of help and assistance they want, and to really look at the language that we use and how we make things easier to access, simplify things, and understandable in a variety of languages.
Thank you for that, Susan. So let's move back to the Q&A chat. It looks like there's a couple questions here that are asking about, I guess, immediate steps moving forward. What can be expected, within the next 3 months, or what to expect before 2030. So maybe we can talk a little bit about vision or next steps. Susan, do you have something on that?
Sure, Marco, thank you for this question. I think the most immediate next step is the Department of Aging has an Aging and Disability Resource Connection Advisory Committee, and that group meets quarterly, and under their purview, we are working actively to increase the number of emerging and designated ADRCs in our state, and that group has been with our partners at the local level, has been very successful in increasing the reach of that ADRC network to now cover half of the state's population. And a theme that carries through all of today is we're just getting started. So we're very proud about that coverage, and there's still a lot of room to grow. We also are working on some IT projects to build the back office network that supports all of this, that looks at standardized intake, how we share data between the state of California and area agencies on aging and independent living centers. We are looking at a web portal that's in development as an IT project, and strengthening the state's 800 number for a more robust, warm human contact center. And then we're also doing those focus groups that I just mentioned so that we can be more helpful and connect better with our target audiences in marketing and communications.
Thank you for that question. Next, let's go back over to the lines. Let's unmute Kester Waters. Kester, is your microphone unmuted?
There. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Susan, and thank you for answering my question that I put in the chat, but I think maybe you misunderstood me a bit. All of what I am hearing is like preaching to the choir. I have been advocating it since I became a member of Alameda County Advisory Commission and chair of the ADRC Advisory Committee. My problem is that in both capacities, but especially at the ADRC level, we've been unable to get the information that we need to even begin to offer opinions. And I'm wondering how we can proactively become team members. And I've brought this up with the AAA and the 4 partners, and kind of get the idea that what they're going to do is wait until they have a beta test, which to me is way, way, way too late for. And so I was very interested in the results of the surveys done by Cal State Sacramento, which is right exactly in line with what I'm advocating. But the advisory committee cannot act unilaterally. We can start asking questions, but until we have actionable information, we can't do anything. And so I'm just wondering about, it seems like we've got the CDA level and a lot of wonderful things being done at that level. But when the rubber hits the road at the local levels, there's not, I don't know how to put it, total buy-in, or not really helpful information about how to act at the local level.
Mm-hmm. So we would love, I'm not sure where you reside, Kester, but we'd love to.
Yeah, Alameda County. I live
Okay.
in Berkeley.
Okay, okay. So we'd be happy to talk with you offline about some suggested next steps to see where you could pick up in Alameda County where your advisory committee, where things are with your local advisory committee now, and then how we could help you move forward.
Okay, that would be fine if somebody contact me, perhaps.
I'll give you my email in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kester. We'll be sure to, we'll put Susan's info in the chat, and we'll also get your information as well, so that we can follow up with you offline. Okay, Susan, it looks like we've got probably a handful of questions that are asking about, I guess this also popped up in the town hall, the hubs and spokes concept. What's the difference between that and the ADRC? Maybe we can just touch on it a little bit about the hubs and spokes was just a concept and what the next steps are moving forward, because I think there's just questions about hubs and spokes and ADRC and moving forward. What's the difference?
Sure. So the hubs and spokes was a framework and a concept. It was not a proposal. So it didn't live anywhere other than on the town halls and the survey. And we are unlikely to use the hubs and spokes term going forward because of the confusion that it has created. So when we talk about the Aging and Disability Network at the Department of Aging, we are talking about the 33 area agencies on aging and our state's independent living centers and the Aging and Disability Resource Connections as the three primary entities that deliver, connect people and deliver services throughout our state. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Susan. And just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to hit the raise your hand icon and we'll unmute your line. Or you can hit *9 if you've called in today. And it looks like we've got another hand raised. Melissa Jacobs, we will unmute your line.
Hi there. Hello. This is actually Ruth McKenzie. I'm covering for Melissa Jacobs, who is unable to attend, but I am here in Sacramento. And it's really interesting to me, the confusion between hubs and spokes. And I think I've got a small piece of fun fact trivia on that concept that may be interesting to some people. And basically, it's that at Sacramento State, they have a wonderful public policy and administration program. And in that program, one of the things they teach is they make all the students take an economics class. And the economics instructor talks about Sacramento's historic place along the rivers, and that it was a hubs and spokes model that passed goods and services and was a critical place in California's infrastructure, meaning the gold would come out of the mountains through the spokes to the hub and then further distributed. So it's simply a familiar metaphor that was used. And to me, it was immediately familiar, and I immediately knew the concept, but it was because of that education. And it's just so interesting to hear so many people go, oh, this is a bad metaphor. It's a bad metaphor. But really, it was a concept for understanding urban development and service good delivery and transportation systems. And so it was a borrowed one that resonates with me. I don't know if whoever coined it and said, yeah, let's do that one. I don't know if they intentionally took it from there, but that's where I get it from. And I'm willing to bet, given how many people go through that program in this town and then go to work at the Department of Aging, as well as other California systems or government agencies in California, because that is our town's largest employer. They may have picked that metaphor up and borrowed it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it hailed from the Federal Administration on Community Living, but you're right, it does pop up in other sectors as a metaphor for how things are organized. It's not unique to aging and disability. Thank you for that history.
All right, let's go to, Bill Pelter. We'll unmute your line.
Hello and good afternoon. Many of us attended the great one-year anniversary summit for the master plan. And during that presentation, we heard Secretary of California Labor, Natalie Pelugia, I think how she pronounces her name, talk about the huge investment that's coming for the caregiver workforce initiative and how there's going to be a lot of effort to have a diverse caregiver workforce. I wonder if there's any updates on when we on the local level will see actual things happening on this. In my case, I live and work in the East Bay, and we really do have a paid caregiver and direct service professional worker shortage that's been on for some time, and this would be really go a long way to help out.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment, and you're absolutely right. Most parts of our state are experiencing a workforce crisis right now. In the current budget, there's nearly $1 billion invested in training and stipends for the direct care workforce, from home care to in-home supportive services and community-based organizations. And those initiatives are just now getting off the ground. So those programs and initiatives and dollars have just started flowing and will flow through 2023. The governor's January budget also included an additional $1.7 billion in workforce investments. So these are all in the works as we speak. And you can follow CDA, Department of Aging. We recently held a Wednesday webinar, and we hold outreach events on our workforce initiatives. We'll be having another one coming up probably maybe as soon as June. So stay tuned for more on that.
And again, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to hit your raise your hand icon that you see if you'd like to ask it live, or feel free to type in your question in the Q&A box. If you have any questions pertaining to any of the information that was presented today via Sac State's research or CDA's presentation. Let's go to Elna Times. Looks like she's got her hand raised.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, one of which is about the updates on the Master Plan on Aging, various subcommittees. I'm particularly interested in the LTSS committee, and I'm dismayed to find that they haven't updated anything on that page since 2020. Is somebody doing a job of updating what is reported for each of these committees? That's a minor concern. The biggest one I have is something that I ran into doing my doctorate, which was that the adult daycare programs in the state are having serious trouble staying in business when they get a low funding situation. In Santa Clara County, we've had a situation where during low funding periods, some of these agencies had to go out of business completely. That's absolutely not acceptable. Is there a provision in the Master Plan for Aging budgeting process to maintain more stable funding for these agencies that we create because of the need?
Thank you for that question. So we earlier when I talked about the roadmap that's underway, there is a state level, the Department of Healthcare Services that oversees our state's Medi-Cal program is about to embark on a statewide gap analysis and roadmap to determine where all Medi-Cal services are provided. So what you mentioned is true with community-based adult services, also known as adult day healthcare. They will be examining where those centers are located. where they are not located, which counties have adult day healthcare, which do not. And then even in a county where it exists, the distance may be so wide between centers that people can't access it. So that is a big emphasis of what's happening now, is to map out all of the services across our state to see where we have gaps to make investments in new programs. And Debbie is our expert here. Debbie's adding some things in the chat as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Elna, for that question. Let's see. So it looks like there's a few other questions in the Q&A that is also asking about funding specifically for a few different things. And I'm thinking those maybe be better suited when in the next steps when we're having those other work groups. If you agree, Susan, or if you want to touch on any of those, I think those are a little specific with some of the funding questions here. We want to try to answer all the questions about the presentation and just the hubs and spokes concept in general. So more to come on that. Those of you, we see your funding questions and we'll be sure to follow up with you offline and we'll be having a further discussion about that. Is there anything you wanted to add on that, Susan?
No.
Okay.
That's a good approach, Connie.
Yeah, let's see. So one last reminder, if you guys would like to ask a question regarding today's presentation, anything that Sac State has presented on, anything that CDA has presented on, please feel free. You can punch the raise your hand icon or click on the raise your hand icon and we'll unmute your line, or feel free to add that question to the chat and we will answer it. So we'll give it just another minute. And again, while we're just waiting for another minute to see if there's any additional questions about today's presentation, today's presentation has been recorded and we will have it up on our website and also our YouTube channel. We'll be sure to put that into the chat link so that you can have access to it. It should be up within the next 48 hours, if not sooner, but it will be available there as well. And also the presentation that you've seen as well will also be available. See, looks like we've got one more hand. We will take this last question. We'll go to Gary Sutter. We'll unmute your mic. Gary, can you hear us? Is your microphone unmuted? There you go.
Hi. Yeah, I just would like to get clarification on a response to one of the questions in the chat regarding AAAs that cover more than one county. Early on, I believe there was a proposal, at least floated out, to combine, or rather take AAAs that had more than one county and split them into two. Is based on that, the answer that was given, is that now not on the table, or is that proposal basically not an option now, or is it still in a possibility? And if so, when might that happen?
So with this data and findings that we took receipt of today, that was a topic that surfaced, that there was confusion and concern about geographic boundaries, maps. So we heard that feedback. There currently is not a proposal. There has not been a proposal to make that change. I believe there were different scenarios were drawn up and shared, but there has not been a formal proposal that CDA has initiated that would change those maps or geographic boundaries. In an earlier slide, we talked about the three main themes for the next steps, which are governance, geographic boundaries, and funding formulas. And so those are three areas that we will be continuing the work and we'll be engaging with many of you on to have deeper conversations on, but there are no proposals at this time.
Right. Thank you, Gary, for that last question. And it also looks like, let's see, the question earlier about the LTSS subcommittee, if you want to look in the chat, there's some information on there with when their next meeting is and some of the information that I think answers your question about why there where the information is on the website. So if you want to take a look at that. And it looks like there's no more hands raised. And I think we've covered all the questions that we're asking specifically about the presentation today. So just one last call. If you have any questions regarding what was presented by Sac State, if you want to raise your hand now and we can unmute your lines, or feel free to put your question in the chat. So we got a couple more hands we'll take. So we'll do these last two questions. Let's go, Marco. We'll unmute your line.
Hi, this is Megan Granada. This is not Marco. I don't know why it's saying my name is Marco. Marco is my counterpart down in Orange County. Question, if maybe I misheard, but it sounded like you all are considering maybe retiring the name Hubs and Spokes. Is that the plan? And if so, how would this initiative be rebranded?
So that is a great question. The feedback that we heard, for purposes of the Department of Aging, Hubs and Spokes is a metaphor to describe a concept. So it's not so much an initiative as it was a starting point for conversation and dialogue through the town halls and stakeholder activities that happened over the summer and the fall. What we have heard in the feedback is that term is confusing, especially when it's layered on top of bona fide terms such as Area Agency on Aging, Aging and Disability Resource Connection, Independent Living Center. And so it has caused a lot of confusion. So it's not a term that the Department of Aging will continue to use. We will try to use very simple language that describes the network as it exists, and we will have lots and lots of conversations in many settings to talk about future terminology, and that terminology would align with any changes to the system, any structural or funding changes.
Great, and we'll go to the last question. Howard Green, will unmute your mic. Or your line is now unmuted if you want to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. There were a number of thoughts about a name change. It sounded like there was a thought that we would be 51% or more disabled. And does that mean that you're going to have a new department name? And what is the real mix in the population of aged versus disabled, or multi, as you like, if you like?
So that was a multi-pronged question. That there are no plans currently to rename the California Department of Aging. So we will remain CDA for the foreseeable future. In terms of the demographics, I shared with you what the population is expected to look like with the 60 and above. I can't tell you today the exact breakdown in California's population among older adults and people with disabilities, and then older adults who may have disabilities. But we do look forward this summer to sharing the 2020 US Census data and what that means for the state of California. So we may find those answers for you this summer. And I think there was a fourth question in there that I might have missed.
Well, I guess it would be interesting to identify how much funding is aged and how much funding today in disability, and will the funding then be the sum of the two or greater than the sum of the two?
So this is a really exciting time for the state of California and the leadership we have with Governor Newsom and California's Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Mark Galley, where we're really looking at how we can better integrate and be more inclusive. And there are, when we talk about being person-centered, we don't want to use those labels necessarily. We really want to look at an individual's circumstances and what their needs are and where those needs are best provided. So in terms of our Medi-Cal program, we have expanded full scope Medi-Cal to individuals 50 and above. With adult protective services, we've lowered that age to 60. So there are a lot of changes afoot that are, in my view, very positive, where we're looking at the whole person and trying to avoid some of that categorical funding and those silos that serve, that provide barriers that we don't want to create.
Are there titles like Title IIIA and so forth for disabilities?
So California has a Department of Developmental Services and a Department of Rehabilitation, in addition to the Department of Aging and our Department of Healthcare Services that provides Medi-Cal coverage for the entire lifespan. So there are a number of revenue sources at the state and federal level that support older adults and people with disabilities, as well as family caregivers. So that's a much more involved conversation that we can get to at another time.
Great. Thank you for that last question, Howard. We're almost at time, so we want to make sure that we wrap this on time. So thank you, Susan, for answering all the questions, and thank you, everyone, for your thoughts and your input and your questions. Again, this is an ongoing conversation that we're having. It doesn't just end here today. We'll have more follow-up. So thank you, everyone, for the feedback on the polls. We'll be reorganizing some work groups to kind of really talk more in depth about some other, I know there's other questions that have also been floated, but we can go more in detail with some of those questions and themes with you all. So we look forward to that. Again, today's presentation is recorded, so we'll have it posted on our website and also our YouTube channel within the next 48 hours, if not sooner. If you have any additional questions that you think of, you can always feel free to send it to us. Send it to communications@aging.ca.gov. Again, there's our website you'll see if you want to find additional information about any of our services and program. So thank you again for everyone that attended. Thank you everyone today that presented. Thank you, Sac State, for analyzing all that information. We know it was a lot of minutes of information and surveys that you had to go through. So we really appreciate the work that you've done there. And we look forward to furthering the conversation with everyone. So with that, I guess we will end today's webinar. Thank you very much.